ADHDers are trying so hard to do what they see everyone else doing, and they just feel like they're barely able to keep their head above water. And so it does feel so debilitating. It's not because they're broken or they have this disorder that makes life so much harder than everybody else's. It's because they haven't been given a manual.
All right, my people, I'm so excited for this. Jheri South is back, baby. This is awesome. If you haven't, listen to episode 430. And that's where we talked with Jheri about ADHD being a superpower. You'll also hear me admit that I was kind of shocked that that was when I realized over 400 episodes of Dream Think Do, and somehow we'd not talked about ADHD yet. And oh my gosh, it's such a fruitful and amazing conversation. And we get feedback. You guys are awesome. Dream Think Doers are amazing listeners, encouragers, and we get feedback from every episode. But I can tell you the feedback that we got on this particular episode was just different. People were letting us know it's changed their lives. It really gave them new perspectives. It helped them to see themselves differently. We had one woman tell us that she was able to see her kids differently for the first time. It was amazing. So I'm like, Jheri, we got to have you back because I felt like we were just scratching the surface in our last conversation. So yeah, let's get back after this. Just for those who haven't listened to 430, I do recommend it. But just to let you know, Jheri is the proud mom of 7 neurodivergent kiddos. Jheri was also diagnosed with ADHD as an adult. She says that that was a point where she got to reinvent herself and harness ADHD as a superpower. You will hear that. But now she's gone on to get additional training and she's turned around and not only taken the lessons from her own life and the experiences of being a parent, and now she's helping people around the world to truly turn ADHD into the superpower that it is. And one of the things we were talking about before is, I'll tell you what, the toolbox that helps somebody with ADHD is a toolbox that can help everybody. But boy, it can help the parent, the kiddo, all of it even more. So I'm so excited to get after this. Jheri, welcome back to Dream Think Do, my friend.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here, and I was loving listening to everything that you were saying. I am so glad to hear that that episode helped people. I mean, it really warms my heart.
And again, I like, we have great guests. I'm wildly blessed. Every guest, every conversation it's amazing in its own right. But even Austin, my assistant who helps with the show, she's like, "Oh my gosh, the feedback on this one's just different." And I'm like, "It is, but you can, again, this toolbox is so powerful." And like we were talking about before, I think you are giving people a set of new glasses to be able to look at the world. And if anybody's ever had a new set of glasses where they realize, that's when they realize, "Oh my gosh, my eyes, like, how have I been seeing the world?" Like, if you get that new set of glasses, that new prescription,
it's like a whole new life now, right?
Yeah, exactly. I can see leaves now and all this stuff. That's what you're doing for people with people. So I told you before, like, I had a plan, but then I did something crazy and I put it out to the Dream Think Do audience, like, "Hey, Jheri's back. I've got an expert on ADHD. What questions do you have?" And oh man, did people just hit me with some great, rich questions. So I'm going to ask some of my questions, but I'm also going to ask some of the audience's questions because they're so good. But where I wanted to start is in some ways where we ended our last conversation. Because again, I won't dive deep on that, but we talked about what it was like to be diagnosed with ADHD in your 40s, what it's like to be a parent to 7 amazing kiddos who all have different opportunities and challenges, all of those things. We talked about time blindness, which is so good. We'll just let that hang there so people go and listen to 430. But one of the questions I had is, as a mom and as someone with ADHD yourself, what's one thing you wish the world just knew? Like something that you wish everybody understood better about ADHD?
Well, I think that there's just so much misinformation about ADHD. And I think overwhelmingly what I see out in the world as I'm putting my information out there is that because the medical community looks at this as a disorder, because it is neurological, I think that most people, when they hear that their child has ADHD, or if they're struggling with some ADHD we'll call them symptoms, executive
Yep.
functioning deficits. They look at this as a negative thing. I've had parents say to me, I'm worried I've passed this on to my children. I'm so worried about their future. ADHD is ruining my life. And I wish that people understood that really, sincerely, there are more gifts to neurodivergence than there are setbacks. But the problem, we were just talking about this before we went live, that
Yeah.
ADHDers is the same way that we have experienced time blindness. We're very all or nothing. And so what I have experienced with my clients, and it's been true in my own life, is that when I am floundering in the things that I don't understand about ADHD, ADHDers are trying so hard to do what they see everyone else doing, and they just feel like they're barely able to keep their head above water. And so it does feel so debilitating. It's not because they're broken or they have this disorder that makes life so much harder than everybody else's. It's because they haven't been given a manual for how their
Yep.
brain operates. It's actually, like if we went to Home Depot and we could buy a neurological system, yours is
Wouldn't that be
different.
something? Yeah,
Right.
exactly right.
The lever
Exactly right.
isn't there, it's a button, right? And so
Right?
it's like they're trying to operate and function in a way that their brain needs different tools. It needs a different system. And so once they figure that out, when we can overcome some of the debilitation that we're experiencing, life takes off and all
Yeah.
of the gifts come to the surface. And so I would love to be able to shout from the rooftops to anyone who's experiencing ADHD. I promise it gets better. If you can figure this part out and your
Yep.
self-confidence improves, your gifts will come to the surface and you will be able to accomplish anything you
Yep.
set your mind to.
Well, I told you before we hit record that a woman came up to me at church. She's like, "Oh my gosh, that episode." We have listeners all over the world, so it's fun when somebody locally comes up to me. She's like, "Oh my gosh, that episode with Jheri changed my life." She's like, "I started to see myself differently. I started to see my kids differently." She's like, "I started to, get into Jerry's toolbox, and it immediately helped me." You could just see all of this possibility, and so I love what you're doing. That's why I thought we needed to have this conversation, because it really does apply to dreaming bigger, thinking better, doing more of what you're put on the planet to do. But this is such an important topic. So I told you that I put this out and it said, "Okay, guys, what questions do you have?" Because I know you and I kind of came into this conversation with a plan, but we're going to throw some of that out the window and go after some of these questions, because
It's
these
a
are
true
great questions.
ADHD episode, Mitch. I love this, right? This is
Exactly
great.
right. Exactly right.
It's
So
exciting.
one of the great questions was, okay, um, how do you a leader said, "I have an amazing employee that I think has ADHD. How do I come alongside him in this to either talk with him about getting tested or just offer strategies that I think might help?" I think that's a great question because it's layered, right? It's like, should you suggest to someone that they go and get tested, that they go get help, or do you just introduce some of these strategies, or is it both and? What do you think on that? I was like, "Oh my gosh, these are so good."
It's
So what do
so
you think
good.
on that one?
Well, so good. And I just want to highlight this is a good leader because a lot of times my clients are struggling in the workplace and they don't want to let their boss know that they have ADHD because
Yep.
there's a concern that they'll get fired, let go,
Yep.
politics will
Well,
be
that's
involved
one of
and they'll
my
find
other
a reason.
questions for later. So that's great. Yes, I love it.
So I
So
love
yeah,
it when
what
we
do you
have
think?
leaders already thinking about this because,
Yeah.
again, as I just mentioned, we don't want to look at ADHD as this disorder that somebody can't overcome. And so when we put processes and systems in place, either for ourselves or someone in the situation that we're working with who has ADHD, we notice that immediately they seem to thrive. ADHDers flounder when they are trying to do things that don't work for their brain. So simple
Mm,
things like having written instructions instead of just giving somebody manual verbal things to do. I have a great memory, but my short-term working memory fails me a lot throughout the day, right?
yeah.
So I have processes and systems, and that's a great thing about working for myself is that I can decide what I need and I can be creative. But when you're working in an environment where expectations are laid out for you and you have to follow someone else's process processes, there can be a lot of stress for the individual about speaking up and saying, hey, this process isn't really working for me, or do you think we could do it differently? Could you do this for me? You can imagine the person with ADHD might feel like, I don't want to have special accommodations just for me. That's
Sure.
either embarrassing or it's going to be an inconvenience. What if I lose my job? So as a
Right.
leader, if you're going to approach an employee, I mean, every situation's different. It depends on how well you know this person. So
Right.
generally speaking,
Relationship matters, all
right.
those
I don't know
things.
if I would
Yep.
just go in and say, hey, why don't you get tested for ADHD?
That's right.
It's a great thing
Yeah.
to say if you really know the person, but otherwise,
Right.
I think just asking questions, the more questions you ask, the safer the individual with ADHD feels to divulge information. If they recognize this is someone who wants to help me and they're
Yep.
offering me a support system.
Yep.
This is the difference when we have high schoolers going to and they don't have an IEP or they do. The IEP is not there to give them this advantage over everybody else. It's a
Right.
matter of maybe they need printed notes because they're not writing out the correct notes, or maybe they need to sit in the front of the classroom because they're getting distracted back there. There's
Yeah.
specific supports for that individual so that they have the same opportunity as everyone in class, not because they're not smart enough to absorb the material. Same
Right.
thing in the workplace. What are the supports that need to be put in place? ADHDers thrive with organization and schedules and routine, but we're not usually very good at putting those things together for ourselves. So if someone in a leadership position can notice where they're struggling, asking questions, what do you think would help you? Is there something I could do to make this easier? Would you like this kind of a process, or would it help if we put this together in a different way? That person, if they feel open, they'll know what they need. Yes, that
Yep.
would be very helpful. Could we do this? Could we do that?
Well, and that's what I wondered about because, like, as an organization, we use SOPs, standard operating
Right.
procedures. So, for a number of things, we always talk about it. It's a little bit like I don't know if you ever saw the movie Apollo 13. They're in that capsule. Everything's deteriorating, nothing's working. And so, one of the people, I think it was Kevin Bacon's character, had actually taped, don't push this button over, like a note just because like if you push that button, the other guys were going to die, all that kind of stuff. Right. So we always say like our SOPs, we write them when we're in our best thinking so that we can lean on them when we're in our worst thinking.
Yes.
Right. So having good SOPs can be super helpful. We really believe in them. For that person with ADHD, it is a company kind of level SOP saying, do this, do this, do this, do this. Is that helpful? Or is that frustrating or those kinds of things? Is that a tactic or a strategy that can be helpful?
Well, both. I think
Yeah.
that so I have a gentleman that I'm working with, and he really good at sales. He makes really good money. He connects with people really well. He is like the ultimate connector
Yeah.
salesperson.
Relationship person.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And so he's really flourished in that in his career, except for recently new management, a new boss came in, and this person was very rigid about processes and systems. And so
Uh,
now part of his job is office work and filling in boxes and getting things in on deadlines, and he's not doing it well. And so
yeah,
now
he's not
his boss
flourishing.
is frustrated with him and he's at risk of losing his job, even though he's the highest performing salesperson in his office. And so, I don't know enough about the situation to make any judgment on his boss,
Sure.
other than to just say, in that situation, someone who's really good at leadership would be able to recognize this person's strengths and weaknesses. And he has said to me, because he's my client, I wish they could just hire someone to do the stuff I hate doing so that I could just focus on the things that make this
Yep.
company money. And
Yeah.
I think he's right about that. But sometimes even leadership gets caught up in this is the way we do things. This is the way I want to see things. And everyone has to be doing things the same way. And that's where I would push back. Does everybody have to be doing things the same way? Or are we looking at each individual's strengths? And so one thing I was thinking when you were talking also is it's not just about feeling safe enough to say, yeah, I would like those supports to your boss, but also being able to say, this process right here is very difficult for me. Do they feel
Yeah.
safe enough to make that suggestion? Could I do this differently instead of just like, sure, yeah, let's come up with an organizational process? I think when you have an environment where the neurodivergent individual can say that, you're going to have success with that individual. Because I'm telling you
Yeah.
what, if you can get them in an environment where they can hyper focus, they're going to outperform everybody. They
Yeah.
just need to be able to hyper focus. And if there's too
Yeah.
many things that they struggle with, they won't get there.
Yeah. I love it. So what I love about that, I'll ask a follow-up question. Obviously, the person asks this question, so I'll
Mm.
step into their shoes. What are some ways to set up that safe conversation to be able to say, like, because we are a big believer in getting people operating in their strengths as much as possible. You're the owner of a small business. You know that you can't always do that, but we always say, hey, if 80% of your tasks are in your zone of genius, then we're successful, right? We're
Right.
a small enough business that people have to wear multiple hats. And sometimes you have to do those things. Even myself are, doing things outside my zone of genius. But if we can get everybody to 80% of zone of genius, then we're rocking, right? But like, what are some things for this leader to be able to set up a successful conversation around that, to be able to say, okay, maybe they want to have more of a conversation around this. What are a couple of the questions you'd suggest a leader who's obviously they've got a heart for helping someone, that they're coming at this authentically, maybe not like a dictator, those kinds of things. But what are some of those core things they can do to set up a healthy conversation?
Right. Well, I love that you said don't be a dictator. That was
Yeah.
really good advice. But, I think we touched on this a little bit in our last episode, rejection
Yeah.
sensitivity dysphoria. And
Yes.
95% of all ADHDers will experience rejection sensitivity or RSD. They'll experience that to some degree. And that is the
And
extreme.
yeah, I was just gonna say, define that again, because that is
Yes.
so wildly important. It's not they feel bad if they're rejected, like all of us do, but, like, this is really specific. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
No,
go a
no.
little bit deeper into that.
Bitch, I'm an interrupter, so I don't mind being interrupted, right? That's that's part of my ADHD that I love. Like we can all just interrupt each other and no one's
Let's do
offended.
this.
I
Yeah.
love that. Okay, I'm being serious. I love that. So, but RSD, yes, don't think of it as a separate diagnosis. It's just under that umbrella of emotional dysregulation and ADHD. So many
Yep.
times people are when they're thinking of ADHD, they're thinking, "Oh, the hyperactive boy that can't sit still." But ADHD is just as much emotional dysregulation, and this is a neurological wiring issue. This is not an anger management issue. This is wiring that the ADHD individual, usually without some good work on themselves, has a very difficult time controlling because it is a wiring issue. It's not something that they're doing on purpose. And so sometimes we'll see it being acted out, slamming doors or yelling or lashing out, but many times it's internal and it's very painful. And what it is the reaction internally or externally to the idea that there is rejection going on. And so the issue with RSD is it's very unpredictable. You could
Mhm.
give me some constructive feedback one day and I'm like, "Oh, that's a good point, Mitch. Thank you." And then the next day you could give me feedback, let's say on this interview, and I might really spiral in my mind and I can't sleep for 3 weeks and you've hurt my feelings and I think you don't like me and I'm never going on another podcast again and I'm so embarrassed. And nobody likes to be rejected, as you
Right.
mentioned. But this is at an entirely different
Yep.
level. When I was in
Yep.
my 20s, I would have explained it as feeling as though I'm being clawed from the inside out. So when a
Mm.
boss is approaching an employee, we want to go in understanding that this person most likely experiences RSD to some level. It is
Yep.
triggered by failure, disappointment, the idea that I didn't meet your expectations, my own expectations. Teasing, perceived rejection is what it is, right? Constructive criticism and feedback. That can be challenging. I know anyone listening to this that doesn't have ADHD, it might be like, well, then how do I know? Well, you don't. So if you're going to have a conversation, ADHDers thrive in leadership. They thrive in people pleasing, unfortunately, and they want to make other people proud. It's unfortunately where we get a lot of our self-confidence and self-esteem from is, are you happy with me? So
Yep.
I would say when you go into these conversations, start with pointing out all the things that are going right, the things that you love, and really lay the groundwork of, like, in other words, because they're going to immediately see it as a threat. I mean, this is the thing with RSD is your boss could say, hey, I want to talk to you before lunch. And all morning you're thinking, I'm going to get fired. What did I do? Even if there's no reason to believe that. So if you
Yep.
can immediately lower the threat level, I just want you to know this is going to be a good conversation. You're not in trouble.
Yep.
I'm really happy with you. And then lay out some really great things so that when you start delivering even just the questions or, I see your potential and you're already doing a great job, but I want to help you get there, like that kind of language, so that they realize this really isn't something. A lot of times ADHDers, because they have imposter syndrome, they're worried that you don't mean what you say, or you're saying that you don't mean what you're saying, or um that they'll go and dissect the conversation later and they'll find the areas where, oh, well, really, I think they're just
This is
trying to
what
be
they
nice.
think or really
Right.
meant. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So you just want to be aware of all that. I don't want it's like this leader, for example, to just now feel like they can't say anything. It's just if you were talking to somebody that was hypersensitive and you really wanted them to get the message. When I'm talking to parents and we're discussing what do you want the outcome with your child to be, if it's
Yeah.
parenting teens, because a lot of times when parents are disappointed in their child, I know I'm going off on a different tangent here, but it will all come together
It relates. Yeah.
to a conversation with their kids and they'll vent and they'll express their disappointment and frustration and they'll come out and they'll think that didn't really go that well. And I'll say, well, before you went in, did you know what you wanted to accomplish?
Yeah.
Well, no, because we go in with emotions. And so if they go in thinking, okay, at the end of this conversation, I want my child to know I love them. There are consequences, but no matter what, we're going to figure this out together. Then when they go into the conversation, it looks very different than how it normally does when we just go in and say, what were you thinking? And I can't believe this.
Yep.
And so it's the same thing. If you go in thinking, okay, here's what I want to accomplish, these 2 or 3 things by the time I'm done with this employee, I think you'll have a very productive conversation and they'll feel that from you.
I love that. And it's funny because that you just answered one of the other questions on the list is I have a team member, they seem to have ADHD and they seem to spiral after feedback more often. So
Yes.
I love what you're talking about. Now, a question that I have on that is it sounds like writing things down or having very clear steps if something needs steps, those kinds of things in this kind of feedback session, does it make sense to have a list of things written out? Does it work better to create that list together? Like if you're really wanting to help somebody take those next steps, is it better to tell them what those next steps are? Is it better to create those next steps together? Like what are those things, especially as we're dealing with that, wanting to really avoid the dysphoria that can happen around rejection, right? What's best way to nail down and clarify those next steps?
Well, I'm thinking, if it's me, I think I would feel better if we were creating the steps together, but that doesn't mean that you can't come in with some things already written down. ADHD brains, it doesn't matter if it's a teenager or it's an adult, if it's like chores or a
Yep.
work project that has to be done, can become easily overwhelmed when you're just confronted with this thing that has to be done. For a child, it
Right.
could be clean the basement. It's like, oh my gosh, doesn't matter if you've cleaned the basement 100 times before, you're thinking, this is going to take me all day. And adults do that too with work projects or the things that need to be done. So when we time chunk it and we say, okay, well, actually, the basement, you just have, vacuuming, dusting, this thing and that thing, the brain says, okay, that'll only take an hour. It
Right.
seems obvious, and why can't we just do that for ourselves? But that's just how the ADHD brain works. So we want to have processes and systems, and we want it to be written out. There's overwhelm if there's just this long, never-ending list, or if you're going to put 20 things on it and say, here's what to do. But if we can break it down, if we can have a time attached to it, I know there's lots of different situations here, but we want to have things written down and expectations really clear so that we can measure and they can measure whether or not they are meeting, those expectations. So whatever that looks like, I think if it were me, I would definitely want to be on board with feeling like I helped contribute to
Right. Right.
creating these expectations.
I love that. So it's coming in with some expectations or some possible steps, but maybe involve them in saying, "Hey, what do you think the best sequence is? Or how can we do this? What order makes sense?" Or so get some ownership, get some involvement, which is again a good, solid leadership strategy, good, solid parenting strategy, but it's probably even more important here. So that I love this kind of conversation.
Well, and
Now,
can I say something real quickly?
oh yeah,
You and I both
sure,
know, like, you can feel how people feel about you. And so I
absolutely.
think that every ADHD person usually knows. I mean, keep in mind there's comorbidity. So there might be ADHD people on here that think, like, well, no, I'm good with time or I am organized. Okay, probably, but also just the average ADHD person, like if you don't have comorbidity, you don't have an anxiety disorder, you don't have OCD, we're not good with time and we're not organized. So there's always going to be exceptions to that, but I would argue there's probably some comorbidity there if you're really
Yep,
good at time and things like that. But we're not good at those things, and we know that about ourselves. And so we're always worried that people can see through us, like, oh, they're going to know I'm so disorganized or I have a hard time being on time. So what ADHDers want is they want people to see them for their strengths. They're always
yep,
so self-conscious about people seeing them for their weaknesses. So if you're
yep,
going into a conversation like this, recognizing these things aren't such a big deal because I see the strength in you. It's just like a kid in school. I'll see, let's say like a junior high school student with ADHD, out of control, bothering people, in trouble every single day. And as soon as that teacher says, you know what? You're so good at helping me with this task. Can you sit over here? I'm going to have you cut this out for me, run to the office. That child becomes a model student in that class. They're not interrupting, they're not bothering anybody. They're going to the office. They're actually managing now. Everyone be quiet in line. It works for adults too. When you can see what they want you to see, their
yeah,
strengths start to rise to the surface. And so highlighting that for them,
yeah.
I'm just thinking of this as we're talking, because if we're just talking about like, yeah, I realize, you struggle with time management, or let's create some organizational processes, they still might leave thinking, okay, that was helpful, but I feel like an idiot. What do you see in them? They want to
Yeah.
hear that.
Yep. That you believe in them. And it is, I always talk about this, especially we teach a lot on coaching and mentoring for leaders. And you can give somebody the best question or the best phrase, but I said, you got to say it from the heart. And the way you say it matters, right?
Yes.
Like, you can understand the mechanics of a question. You can understand the mechanics of a process, but you got to be in it for the right reasons and from the heart because people pick up on it, right?
Yes,
So, I
absolutely.
love that. I love that. Now, a couple of the other great questions. I'm like, oh, I hadn't even thought of this. But somebody said, "Oh my gosh, I love Jheri. She's helped me so much. I've always wanted to ask her, is there a planner specifically designed for ADHD?" So I'm guessing like, a to-do list kind of organizer or, an app or whatever. What kind of planner do you use or what do you suggest for the people that you work with?
Okay, you're going to laugh because this is going to be the most ADHD answer. I created a planner almost a year ago. It's ready to print for the world to use, and I've never
We haven't
finished.
hit play or
No,
hit
like, it's
hit go
there.
yet.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
there. It's like I've looked into the pricing on Amazon to get it out there, and if I wanted to publish it a different way, as somebody is ready to do it, I hired a guy, and then and it's great. It's a great planner,
It
by
is
the
so
way.
good. It is so good, people. I can only imagine. I
Yeah,
love it.
so there's kind of this running joke like, oh, planners for ADHDers don't work. And I don't agree with that, obviously. The reason that people say that is because ADHDers work off of novelty. And by the way, one of the things you and I talked about was what gets the ADHD brain engaged, and if we want to talk about that here today. And so we can briefly if we decide we want to do
Yeah.
that. But ADHDers get really excited over novelty. And this is the reason that we start projects and then we don't finish because the novelty wears off and we're on to the next thing. So ADHDers, like if you have ADHD, you can picture this. It's like you're shopping for the perfect planner. What color is it? And how big is it? And what pen am I going to use to write in it? And then it comes and we fill it all out. And then after a week, we're like, and we kind of veer away. So it doesn't work if it's not exciting anymore. However, we can become very good at routines that are working for us. And so what I feel like as an ADHD person, I'm allergic to is monotony. I don't want every day to be the same. I get tired of my goals after a while because now it's like, oh, I'm still doing the same thing 2 months later. I want to do something different. And so
Something new.
yes, right. So the planner I came up with, and I would love, you could report report back to me. I would love for your audience to tell you, because I was making some last minute tweaks since I'm like, okay, it hasn't gone to print yet, what they would love to see in a planner, because there are planners like out on Amazon, for example. I don't have one to recommend because I haven't found the perfect one on Amazon, which is why
Yeah.
I created one.
I was going to say.
But there's different things on there. Sometimes there's energy mapping, or I've had some ADHDers tell me they like to write down their schedule and then at the end of the day, write down actually what they did that day so they can see how much time they wasted. I do not want to do that. I don't want any more reason to feel bad about myself, but I
Yeah.
have a lot of ADHDers that like to do that. So my planner specifically, what I did was I took, like if you have a goal, it's usually you're working on the same things every day, week after week, and
Yep.
ADHDers struggle with that because it's monotonous. And so I took 5 categories, like let's say it's family, finance, physical health, mental health. And then for each of those 5 goals, I came up with 5 mini goals that I want to be working. So now you have 25 goals that you want to be working on during the month, but they all are things that you've planned out ahead of time, things that you'd be willing to do. And so it's more flexible that each day you just pick 5 things that you're going to put in that week, and you're planning it 1 week at a time. The reason it works really well is because it keeps the novelty going.
Yeah.
You don't feel, when ADHDers feel shame or feel like a failure, they give up. And so when does that happen? When we miss a day of our goal, we didn't work out, we cheated on our diet, we didn't do the thing we said we were going to do, and next thing you know, you've given up. So my planner relies heavily on working on goals, and it's very flexible the way that you work on them,
Mm.
and you get to feel good. You get that dopamine every day because you still did things.
Yeah.
But I think one thing that I talk a lot about with my clients is we know how the ADHD brain works. We know that it's a different neurological system. We know what engages the brain. We know that ADHD burnout isn't as much about rest as it is about not having enough dopamine. So we can look at it and say, okay, this is what's good for the ADHD brain. But one thing the ADHD individual has to do is really get to understand themselves personally. What are your triggers? What causes your burnout? What's an ADHD booster for you throughout your day and then your week that gives you that dopamine so that you don't get burnt out throughout the day? So with my clients, I'm helping them create an owner's manual, because even though ADHDers are very similar, you might operate differently than your best friend who has ADHD. And so just like we might experiment with medication, I'm not pushing medication, but if you're someone who's on
Yep.
medication, you've probably had to try different medications and different doses. We're also doing that with executive functioning skills and learning how we can use a planner to our benefit, because different things are going to work for different people.
I love that. I love that. And I can't wait to see your planner when it's available, because
I have to put it out now. I just
I
talked
was gonna
about it.
say, this is accountability now.
That's
Well,
right.
maybe
Okay, you
we can
guys.
even time the launch of this episode around the launch of the book. So,
Okay,
or the
it's coming.
planner.
It
I
is
love it.
ready. It is ready to go to
We
print.
just
It's
have
all
to
ready.
push. Yeah, push, publish. I love it. I love it. So let's those are some of the audience's questions. We'll see if we have time to get back to a couple more, because there are so many so good questions. But I do want to get back to what you and I had originally talked about, is that emotional regulation. And we are already you were just tapping into that just with talking about the planner. But I think this is such an important conversation, especially for people with ADHD. But I know as you and I were going back and forth on this, I'm like, oh my gosh, yet another set of tools in the toolbox that would help everyone. So talk to us about emotional regulation, especially when it comes to, for the ADHD, going after a big dream.
Mhm.
Often it takes time, and there's going to be ups and downs. There's going to be setbacks. There's going to be wins, all of those things. How is it different? And what can we do if we have it, or if we love somebody with it, to navigate that?
Well, so again, RSD, I know I keep coming back to that, but
Yeah.
one thing I wanted to highlight too is that one of the big differences between myself and pretty much any other ADHD coach that I've seen out there is that executive functioning deficits exist, and most ADHD coaches are focusing on executive function because
Yep.
it's important, right? We're using it in our everyday life. My approach is a little bit different because we all know in the ADHD world, we know RSD is such a huge issue. It's affecting our relationships, how we perform at work, our self-confidence, and that affects everything else. I approach everything, even executive function, at the RSD level, because
Hmm.
what I see is that not being able to create motivation, not being able to follow through on projects still comes from emotional dysregulation, because what you believe about yourself and what you've been told about ADHD and whether or not that's become your identity and your self-confidence level because of how your upbringing, not necessarily upbringing, but just even like childhood years and in school,
Yep.
all of that matters when it comes to whether or not you're able to overcome your executive functioning deficits. So I want to highlight that first. And then when it comes to going out and accomplishing your dreams, or your goals, I think it's important to recognize that RSD plays such a big role here because nobody likes disappointment, just like nobody likes rejection. But when like I have come now to believe like failure is absolutely necessary. I might have
Yep.
mentioned this on our podcast. I can't remember before, but I remember listening to a podcast years ago. There was this young millionaire, he's still in his 20s, and he said, if you're not having at least 5 failures a month, you're not working hard enough in your business. Failure should be something you're striving for so that you
Yep.
you recognize I'm working hard enough because there will be failures. But for ADHDers, disappointment isn't just something that they can easily reflect on right away. Disappointment creates an emotional flood and it
Mm.
triggers RSD. So think about what happens when you're trying to get out of turmoil, emotional turmoil. All of us does one of three things. We either resist our emotions, we just kind of push them down, pretend like they're not there, and we keep going. We react to them. We either blame somebody else, or we lash out, or we shut down, or we avoid them. And
Yeah.
avoiding them looks like indulging in behaviors usually. Like, let me just tune out and I'm going to watch Netflix for 12 hours, or I'm going to go, have a drink, or it could be
Yep.
anything, look at
Yep.
pornography or whatever it is, because we're trying to avoid how we're feeling. Well, ADHDers are intense feelers. When we're up, we're up. And when we're down, we're down. And rejection spikes with RSD when we have failed at something. So it's difficult for ADHDers to be reflective when they're experiencing disappointment because there's so much emotional flooding. And then what are we doing? We're very impulsive. So we are quitting, we're blowing up, we're people pleasing, we're numbing out. And this is really an escape from the feeling, not necessarily from the dream.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it can be
Absolutely.
difficult to get back on track. So just recognizing that nobody likes to feel that way. Everybody is trying to escape disappointment. But I would say that the impairment for ADHDers is how long they stay in that place of emotional flood and feeling disappointment, and how difficult it is to get back on track.
Yep.
One of the many times I'll talk about, and I don't think we have time to get into it, but after years of untreated ADHD since childhood, we'll develop some kind of a personality. I would almost call it disorder. It could be like massive people pleasing. But one of those personalities that we'll take on is just almost like a give up mentality of,
Mm.
uh, I've tried that. I failed. I'm not good at it. People tell me I'm not good at it. I get a lot of negative feedback and criticism. So immediately when I try something and I'm not good at it, I'm just not going to do it. Or I can already determine that's probably not going to be good for me. I'm scared of the feeling of failure. So no, not
Yeah.
going to do it.
Wow. So I really appreciate just even the visual of the flood of emotion that somebody experiences. And I think again, everybody can relate to this, but I think what you're saying is somebody that's navigating ADHD, it's a bigger flood. So like
Yes.
probably everybody feels a sense of emotion when they have a setback or when they're, a sense of rejection or whatever. But what you're saying is this wave is probably at least the sensation of it is much more significant. What are some things that we can do for ourselves if we have it, or what are some things that we can do for those that we work with, love, take care of? How can let's go for it, the individual first and then helping others second. So if you're navigating this, if you're like, oh wow, I think that's me, and I feel a wave when that happens, because I know, I'm a recovering worrier. And, that's one of my things that I've had to navigate from a very young age, worried myself sick, like confounded doctor's level sick, all those things. So I know that's one of the areas that I really have to watch for. And I haven't got it whooped completely, but my whole
Yes.
thing is how fast can I get back to not normal, but thriving, right? So it used to be weeks and now, most of the time it's hours, right? So I'm better. I'm not perfect yet, but
That's
I'm
great.
better, but what are some of the ways to navigate this when we start to experience those waves that you're talking about?
Yeah, and I love that you said the word whooped. I just haven't heard that word in a while. It was great to hear. Whooped.
Whooped.
I
That's
liked it.
right.
It's a
I'm gonna
good
whoop it.
word.
Yeah.
It's a good word.
Get it. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Well, a lot of times, well, first of all, we need to become better at just emotional regulation. All of us,
Yeah.
right? That's what it requires is when we're emotionally regulated. I'll always tell people if we're in neutral, and neutrality is where we have clarity of mind, we can solve our problems, we find solutions. But when we are in any kind of negative emotion, we're spiraling. We're usually
Yep.
showing up as the worst version of ourselves. Whether for ADHDers, it's whether we're bored or overwhelmed, we're not showing up. So if we can
Yep.
just get to neutral, sometimes it doesn't even require motivation. Can we just get to neutral to
Yep.
solve our problems and find the momentum to move forward? So it's emotional regulation is the problem. And emotional regulation doesn't mean just staying calm. It means learning how to sit with discomfort. Learning how to be there and work through it and not letting your emotions really, steer the wheel. And so that's the question is how do we when we go back to avoiding emotions, I talk about this all the time. I have a word for what we do when we avoid emotions. It's called buffering. So, in other words, anytime we don't want to deal with what's going on, we buffer by it
Mm.
could be going out and spending money, it could be drinking, it could be getting high, it could be watching TV, eating sugar. It's different for all
Yep.
ages, but
Pick your relief, right? Yeah,
but we live in
absolutely.
a world where it's everywhere. It's so accessible. We don't have
Yep.
to wait for anything. There's instant gratification everywhere, and we'll just get stuck and spiral in that place. And a lot of the work that I do is teaching individuals to not immediately go to a place of buffering, but can you learn to just sit with discomfort? There are
Mm.
a couple of different ways that we earn self-confidence from ourselves. Self-confidence is different than confidence. Confidence is the proof that you have that you're good at something. You already know, if you are good at baking a cake and someone says, "Hey, can you bake a cake for this birthday party?" You say, "Oh, yeah, of course I can. I'm great at baking cakes." That wouldn't be me, but somebody else is
Right,
good at
exactly.
baking
We
cakes.
know those people.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
they're good. But they have proof. I'm good at this
Yeah.
thing and so I can do this. That is not self-confidence. We have a lot of people walking around who are confident in one area or the other, but they
Yeah.
lack self-confidence. Self-confidence is something that you are not born with. You have to earn from yourself. And it's
Yep.
something that requires faith in yourself to say, that sounds scary. I don't know if I can do that. In fact, I'm really worried about doing that, but I can do it anyway. And so
Yep.
when it comes to self-confidence, one of the main ways that we earn it from ourselves is that we're willing to sit with and work through uncomfortable emotions. And it's
Mm.
interesting to me that an emotion is nothing more than a vibration in your body. If I'm angry, my body kind of does the same thing every time. It'll
Yeah.
eventually go away. It will not kill me. Same thing with embarrassment. I don't like to
Yep.
feel it, but it's just a vibration in my body. The lengths that we will go to not have to feel a vibration in our body, to not sit with discomfort. It's so uncomfortable. It's kind of mind blowing when we know it's just a vibration. If we
Yep.
can learn to not give in to the urge to hurry and fix the feeling, I've got to go have a drink, eat sugar, get out of this
Hit
discomfort.
Amazon, right? Go to the mall,
I love,
whatever it might
well,
be.
come on. That's a little extreme, Mitch.
Sorry, I didn't mean to get
What's wrong with
personal.
going to the mall?
I'm a Prime
We're not
member
talking
too. I
about
can get
that.
that.
That's not
I
what we're
can have
talking
this
about.
by 3 o'clock today. Yeah.
No, not my buffering. We're talking about other people's buffering.
Exactly. Yeah, we'll talk about them out there. Yeah.
But if we can, I mean, that's really what it is that the better we get at sitting with discomfort, because instant gratification feels great in the moment. And as soon as I'm done eating that last bite of ice cream, I go back to feeling terrible. And what we do know is that as long as we're experiencing a negative emotion, shame to boredom, we
Yep.
are spiraling and we're staying stuck. And so for ADHDers and really anyone, but ADHDers really struggle with emotional regulation. Another thing I want to point out is that we want to regulate first and then make decisions later. And so a lot of times
Mm.
ADHDers are spiraling and trying to make decisions and they're not regulated. With all of my neurodivergent clients, whether they're ADHD or on the autism spectrum, we're evaluating on a scale from 1 to 10, where are you with regulation?
Hmm.
If you're above a 5, we're not doing a regulation model. I have a reframe response model where we're learning how to change our thoughts and evaluate our thoughts.
Yep.
We're not doing that. We're not engaging in conversation to fix problems. We are just focusing on regulation, because when we can get regulated, if we're under a 5 on that scale, then that's when we can have more clarity. We can understand, how I'm thinking is how it's affecting me and my behavior
Yep.
and what I want to be doing. So I would say learning that regulation piece is so important, because, when we're dysregulated, we start speaking in absolutes, we have give
Yep.
up mentality, and it's just easier to believe that giving up would be the better option, when in fact, what we want to do is become anti-fragile. We want to be resilient and recognize this is good. This is one step closer to where I want to go. How many
Yes.
failures will it take? It's just a reframe. But
Yep.
that can be difficult to do when you are intense with your emotions and you're up and down all the
Yep.
time. How do we regulate that? There is an
That's so
implementable
good.
system to do that.
What I love even the scale, because I can imagine somebody doing the self-assessment on the scale in some ways is probably a part of that, getting them back to saying, "Okay, am I a 4? Am I a 5?" Because I know part of bringing yourself back to normal, neutral, thriving is just to be able to say, "Okay, instead of just reacting, what do I wanna do? What am I doing? Like, what are my thoughts?" All of those kinds of things that can help you to bring you back to that. And then to also say, "Hey, am I at a place where I can start making decisions, or no, I just need to continue to lean into getting back to neutral." So, I love
Regulate
that.
first.
That's amazing. That's great. Where do people find out more about that, more about you taking those next steps?
Well, it's a great question. And we'll just kind of leave them on a cliffhanger here, because one of the things that I came up with was an acronym for ADHDers to understand how to get their brain engaged. And once they understand that, they realize, I've been trying to get engaged the way a neurotypical
Yeah.
person does, and that doesn't work for me. I have an acronym, WIRED. And so I explain that when I'm working with my clients or sometimes in my webinars online. So you can go to my website, which is jherisouth.com. I know it's spelled differently. And I'm also on social media at Jheri South. But I have on my website, there's a lot of testimonials and things like that. But there's a course for ADHD. There's a free ADHD evaluation. We're coming out with an RSD evaluation. There's group coaching,
Awesome.
one-on-one coaching, these free consults. So there's just a lot of stuff there for parents. There's IEP. There's a lot of free stuff there that you can grab that could you read
Yeah,
through
there's
and
a
really
lot of
help you
great
with your relationships. Yeah.
lot of great resources. Do you have 2 more minutes or a couple more
Yeah.
minutes, or do you
You
need to
bet.
roll?
No,
Well, I
I'm
wanna
good.
I wanna honor your time, but I'm like, "Oh, we got an acronym?" Like, I wanna hear about that acronym. I can go a couple more minutes if you can.
Okay. Yes,
I would
absolutely.
I would love to hear some of the basics of that, because I do think, obviously, people are leaning in. They're like, "Okay, this makes sense," all of that. Let's go a little further if we can, especially if you
Okay.
had an acronym for us. So,
I
yeah,
do.
let's go there.
It's my acronym, so you probably won't hear this anywhere else, but it's comes from research. Like, doctors just didn't have a good acronym for this, so we just put it in an acronym. There are 5 things that get the brain engaged if you have
Yep.
ADHD. So I just want you to think about, someone who's neurotypical, and this is what's frustrating for ADHDers is they're comparing themselves to other people. Like, how come I just can't get this done? How come I could get it done last week, and then this week I'm just looking at this thing and I can't force my brain to do it? And this is an important distinction. ADHDers know what to do. They don't know how to force their brain to do it. And that's very
Hmm.
frustrating. And sometimes they'll be
Yeah.
labeled as lazy because they're not, we'll hear all the time, just try harder, just plan better. That's
Yeah.
not
Focus.
the
Yeah.
problem. It's not the
Yeah.
problem. So for a neurotypical person, just because a task is important or that there will be a reward at the end, that's enough for them to just get going. That is utterly useless for an ADHD person. That does not help. So there
Yep.
are 5 things that will actually activate the ADHD brain. Not all of these 5 has to be present. Only one of them does. But if there isn't one of these present, the brain will not turn on. I mean, think of it as a light switch or just a switch. It won't
Yep.
turn on. So we use the acronym WIRED. The first one is want. So think of want as like anything that you're passionate about. The
Yeah.
second one is interest. Anything that you're interested in, obviously the brain can hyperfocus and get engaged. The third one is race or rivalry. So think of this as
Hmm.
competition. If there's
Yeah.
anything that is a race to the finish line, if it's a competition or a challenge, ADHD brains, in fact, most ADHDers, if you say to them, I bet you can't do that. They're like, you want to bet? You want to bet? I'll do it
Watch me.
faster than anybody else. It's a real thing.
Yep. I love that. I think that's great.
It's the fourth one is emergency. So think of anything that's urgent. This is the reason why you might have something that needs to be done at the end of the week. And all week you tell yourself, I'm going to do it. And your brain just doesn't seem to care until 10
Yeah.
o'clock the night before it's due. And your brain is hyper focused on getting it done. This isn't a personality defect. This is an actual wiring issue. Our
Yep.
brain hyper focuses when something is an emergency. And then the last one is different. Or in other words, novelty, anything that's exciting or new that you want to learn about that you've never done before, something that's different for your brain. So want, interest, rivalry, emergency, and different. Those 5 things will turn the brain on and help it to get engaged. And this is so important because if you ask an ADHDer, if you can get your brain engaged and you can stay engaged, is there anything that you can't do? And every ADHD will tell you, no, there's nothing I can't do. The problem is, how do I get my brain engaged? And
Yep.
that's how you learn to inject one of those 5 things into everything that you're doing.
I love that. And again, this toolbox is such a powerful toolbox for everybody, but especially for somebody with an ADHD brain to be able to go. And I love that because that's a tool set you can use for yourself. That's a tool set you can help others with as well. So, oh my gosh, this is so great, Jheri. This is part 2. We're just going to have you back for part 3 because I know I've got more questions. I know
I'm
you've
going to
got
be a
more that we could
regular
talk
on
about.
Mitch's show. This is so great, right?
Get it done. I love it. I love it. So, Jheri, thanks so much for what you bring to the world. We need it. And so grateful for you. I know Dream Think Doers love you. So thank you so much for what you're doing and the gold that you brought today.
Thank you. It has been an honor. I love being here talking to you, Mitch. I appreciate the conversation.